Yeah, I love Ancient City. Oh, gosh. I quoted the ancient part because I'm pretty sure there are actually JavaScript frameworks that are older than this city. This is the second time I've been back now. So, yeah, I guess you could say it's like Series 1, Episode 2. Really grateful for HashRocket for inviting me back. It's kind of surprised, actually. I'm pretty sure people from HashRocket think I'm actually Ben Orenstein. Yeah, it's probably a terrible time to find out that I'm actually not. So anyway, so I did ask. So I've got demands, right? So I'm a bit of a big deal. And, you know, I travel the world thought leadering. And I don't have many demands, but the demands I do have is that I have an entry theme tune, which obviously you didn't deal with. So, you know, you had one job. Number 2, that we have a bath full of blue M&Ms. Again, you know, you didn't see to that. I don't know if any of you ever played this game before. I really used to enjoy it, and I always remembered this screen. Winners don't use Mongo. Yeah. So I'm from London, which is in England. Nobody in England's like this, actually. We're much more like this. And much more like that. So there's a story with this picture. I took this picture. It was at Christmas, and it was on a train, and I woke the guy up, and I said, "Guy, the fuck?" And he said, "Fuck off, I'm doing yoga." All right, douche. So anyway, we had an eclipse. I don't know if you guys had an eclipse. We had an eclipse. Public service announcement: don't stare into the eclipse. You will die. There's only one thing worse than staring into an eclipse. It's staring into Visual Studio. Be gone, evil one. So I work for the money advice service in London. But since the last time you saw me, I've been businessing hard. I started up my own company. It took me a long time. You know, I kind of agonized over the name, went through all kinds of, you know, different permutations and stuff, and then I flipped a table and called it Ben Lovell Limited. But interesting story, when I was incorporating the company, I actually spelt my name wrong. And I'm not shitting you either. And I called it Ben Lovell Limited. So thankfully, the solicitor spotted it and changed the name at the last minute, so everything's cool. By the way, my lawyers are watching, you know, don't take my name. And yeah, my strap line is giving no fucks since 2014. Yeah, that's on all of our like headed note paper and stuff. That works well for business. So anyway, yeah, so thanks again for inviting me back. I hope you're going to enjoy the talk. And yeah, here we go. There is a talk. It's not just the intro. So Raoul's socks. So yeah. So you know this story, right? So you know, Raoul's, we're all going to agree that Raoul's is really good for getting something up and running fast, and you know, we're all here because of that reason. But I'm going to explain to you via the method of science. You saw Hampton's graphs earlier. Hampton's graphs haven't got shit on mine. Check me out. Okay, so this is going to need some explanation. I didn't bring my lab coat with me, and I haven't got my monocle, but bear with me. So over here, on this axis, we have time. And over there, on that thing, we have hate. And I'm going to explain to you, as time goes on, you come to hate yourself with Raoul. So, you know, this is Raoul's new, right? And you are full unicorn, right? You are slinging features like anything, right? I shit you not, you are full unicorn. But you know, time goes on a little bit. You know, things start to get a little crufty. You know, the cost of change and the rate of change is starting to hurt. You know, the test suite slows down and all of these things, right? You're basically a horse in disguise at this stage, right? But fuck, it gets worse. It gets real worse. Even more time passes, you know, and you know, you're on the hate scale, you are maxing out the hate scale. And you're basically just asking yourself, you know, I made a wrong decision somewhere. Shit. Something went wrong in my life, you know. Should have stuck with JavaScript. Should have, yeah, whatever, anything. But then you get to a stage where you just flip the table and you just don't care anymore. You're not even sorry. The expression, it's just so much emotion, so many feels. So yeah, if you want to avoid me in the future, block me on Twitter, block me on GitHub, block me on IRC. Yeah. Also, you know, a few of us have been kind of beta testing this new form of communication. It's called speaking. This is how it works. You come up to me, you open your mouth and talk to me. I open my mouth and talk back to you. Let's try it later on. I find it helps if you have a beer in your hand as well. But anyway, so I really, really suck at software. Like, I super suck. And here's some commits I made the other day. And I'm going to share them with you for your enjoyment. Just pissing in the wind. Fuck this. Yeah, it's a shit bomb. And this is I coined this phrase. This is my eponymous law of software. So like when you speak to people in the future, if you want to show them how clever you are, you just talk about eponymous laws of software, right? And my one is programming is like skipping merrily between car crashes. And it hasn't really caught on yet, I will admit. You know, nobody's really said it to me before. I say it to myself regularly. But you know, why? So why do projects go wrong? You know, especially Rails projects. Well, the ones I work on, that's obvious. But for you guys, you know, what are the symptoms for projects that go wrong? So one of the things that is especially apparent in London at the moment is the nature of the workforce. So we're very much geared towards contract staff, freelance staff, right? So we move around a lot. You know, you never really truly get that sense of ownership. You know, you look at a code base, and you can see evidence of many different hands, you know, many different minds, some of them stronger than others. Another thing is this whole attitude towards just, you know, making it work, making it right, making it fast. Well, unfortunately, most of us just make it and then, you know, invoice and then go home. Myself included. And another thing, you know, like time pressures, right? So I've got 2 young children and they understood that, you know, we'd drive away on holiday. And they'd be like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Well, they got to like 5 and 7, and they learned that actually saying that doesn't speed shit up. If anything, it just slows you down. And unfortunately, you know, for most of us, businesses and project managers, those kind of people, don't really understand that, right? And it makes me sad, right? And another thing is, you could ask, well, you know, with all this hate against Rails, you know, why would you even bother using Rails, right? Yeah, and you know, I can buy that. Not using Rails as an anti-pattern. But, you know, DHH, he's a special kind of thought leader. I mean, everybody agrees with everything he's ever said. So I need you to take this in. So I've got an opinion about this, and it starts with bull, and it ends with shit. You know, bullshit. So, like, this guy is introducing his son to his first steaming dump. Like, what the is this parenting? Is this what parenting's become? Fuck. So there's 3 hard problems in computer science. Number 1 is cache invalidation. Number 2 is naming things. And number 3 is DHH. DHH. No, he's a dude. He's cool, you know. If it wasn't for him, none of us would be here now, so, you know. Changing requirements. So, you know, guess what? You know, requirements change and software projects change, and your project's not special in that regard. Software changes. And of course, you know, if you can build a system that doesn't inhibit change, if you can build a system that enables change, and obviously you're on the road to success, right? But, you know, all of these things add up. And, you know, my advice generally is just quit whining. You know, appreciate how fortunate you are as well to be working in software and be building amazing things, meeting amazing people, and watching me speak. The number 1 best job ever, of course, in 2014, which shows the last time I gave this talk, unfortunately, is a software developer, you know, so enjoy it and quit whining, basically. So anyway, you know, you've done your Rails new, or you're looking at a pre-existing project, and you do the whole git clone stuff, you know, you get it down, and you're just like, oh, dude, seriously, I didn't sign up for this shit. Nope. nope, nope, no. You're like, oh, I can't deal with this. Fuck you, sheep. The GIF. The power of the GIF. So what do you do? Do you get the fuck out? Or do you actually give a shit and try and fix stuff, right? So I'm going to give you my patented 5-step plan, which is mostly just a bunch of jokes interspersed with slides. But let's see where we end up, right? I never promised that I'd teach you anything. So number one, like perception. Perception's so important on software projects. So, there are people that are like constantly positive about everything they do, whether it's, whether they're shipping features they don't believe in and all of those kind of things, right? And perception's really important, especially if you're in a leadership kind of position. And people, being a positive influence is really important. So, imagine a situation where you're kind of going around just your stand-up and you're kind of there and you get into work and you're like super infused, like you've just come back from a conference, everything's great, and you get into your stand-up and you're like, yeah, stand-up time. And then someone says to you, okay, right, so you go. And you're like, yes, it's my turn. I'm building some amazing software today, everything's great. Yesterday I did a load of softwaring and everything's brilliant. And you get to the next person, let's just call this person like, I don't know, Bob or something. And Bob's like, yeah, yesterday was shit. Today it's going to be really shit. And everything's crap. I don't even know why I build software anymore. You're like, cheers, Bob. Thanks. Yeah, next time, can we skip Bob? Positivity and being a positive influence is really important and really helps the team dynamic. And that's why I try and be as positive as possible. Another thing is as well, like being opinionated. So when you're working on a team and, there's people that are very opinionated, I've always found like the single number one bestest ever trademark copyright approach to being opinionated is via pull requests, right? If you want to express an opinion, and let's face it, we're expressing opinions about code constantly, express it with a pull request, Open a pull request, get people to comment on it, and reach some consensus in that manner. And another interesting thing is this whole principle about broken windows. A few of us were speaking about this yesterday, actually. Excuse me. So this term came around, I think it was the mayor of New York, right? So it's this idea that you could walk through a neighborhood and if there was a single broken window or if there was a single piece of graffiti, in all likelihood, that would give people the impression that it was something that wasn't worth caring about, and people were much more likely to write more graffiti or break more windows. And code bases are very similar in my experience, Interesting thing, this kind of like Cub Scout, Boy Scout, Girl Scout rule is about always leaving the camp cleaner than you found it. So it's about, making an assessment on the piece of code that you're about to work on. And, if you find there are problems with it, if you find there's a lack of clarity or intent, you can just give it a quick sweep over and tidy things up and know that you've left the camp better than you found it. So an interesting thing, like teams that I work on and people that I consult with, they've got this kind of like, bottom line or sort of billable line item called refactoring time. What is refactoring time? Like refactoring time doesn't exist. You don't need to ask permission to improve something, right? You should just be doing that. That should just be a matter of course, in my opinion. And of course, it's better to seek forgiveness than ask permission. So anyway, step 2 on the patented plan is affect some form of metrics. Capture some metrics about the piece of code that you're about to work on. So of course, continuous integration is a thing. It's very important, and it's a perfect environment for capturing metrics. So I always make a joke that, you could use CodeShip, but I've got friends from Travis. So use Travis, because it's great. Another thing that's really interesting to me is about style, and especially consistent style in code. So this is really interesting to me, because the code that you write is supposed to, well, first of all, there's 2 audiences for your code, right? There's the machine, which is kind of incidental, really, because 99% of the time, the thing that's interpreting your code is another human being. So, you can optimize for a human being. You can write code that's clear and carries its intent. And you can write code that's really inconsistent and has like white space violations and, you know, mixed use of quotes and, you know, hash rockets rather than like new style, you know, keyword arguments here, regular function arguments there, just that kind of stuff. You know, my strong belief is that when you do that, what you're doing is you're taking away from the intent of the code and the clarity of the code. And it just makes things just that slightly more difficult to parse for a human being who is exactly who you should be optimizing for. So, you know, you can affect a style guide like a common set of styles and idioms and make it approachable. And Rubocop is a perfect tool for doing this, right? I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Rubocop before. So it's by this guy, Bojadir Batsov. So this was a conference last week, actually, where he gave a talk. Really cool guy, like super, super intelligent guy. And he, the way this came about was that at his company, he wrote a style guide, a Ruby style guide, and they decided to open source it, and literally overnight it turned into like a massive, massive success. And there was like pull requests coming in left, right, and center. And then he decided to work on Rubocop, which was a tool that allowed you to apply that style guide to your existing code base. So, you know, you can gem install Rubocop. You probably don't need me to tell you how to do that. I'm not a talking README, but you can do that. And one of the really cool things about Rubocop as well is it builds up like an AST. So it uses a parser by Petr Zotov, a Russian guy, I believe. Like super, super intelligent guy. Like we really owe this guy a debt of gratitude because parser replaced things like Ripper and stuff like that, which if you've ever used Ripper or ever tried to understand it, well, yeah, good luck. So Rubocop's really cool because it can do this whole auto-correction thing. So you can basically set up a file of rules and then run it over your code, and it actually generates an AST and can modify the AST and then write out the auto-corrected code, which is like absolutely amazing to me. And it's sorcery. But stop, right? So before you go in crazy and start sweeping change across your whole code base, you probably want to make sure that you've got at least some form of test coverage, right? So we use tools like Simple Curve, which give you a really cool headline figure, basically on where your code's covered. But an interesting thing with coverage is like you really are sitting on a throne of lies. Like coverage as a metric is probably something that people chase. And you know, I've seen it abused as well. Like you can really abuse this, and it doesn't really give you any true hint as to the quality of your tests, right? And whether they're actually fulfilling their intent. But coverage is a really interesting thing when you combine it with cyclomatic complexity. So cyclomatic complexity is a measure of essentially, the branching in your code. So let's just imagine, for instance, you're looking at a method, right? So it performs static analysis on a method. So the method score starts at 0. And any branch, so like any if or control flow change, or any block invocation or anything like that, actually adds a point to the score, right? And of course, higher scores hint at more complex code that has more edge cases, and coverage and edge cases kind of go hand in hand, right? So when you're writing tests for your code base, you'll generally be at a higher level, you know, cutting a simple line through the code base. With a feature spec or something. But at the unit level, you'd want to be covering all of the different eventualities, right? And that's where this kind of tool really comes in handy. So you can use metric foo, Sakura. And as I've said, coverage and cyclomatic complexity really inform your tests. So another thing you're probably going to come across is duplication, right? So there's gems for that. So there's Flay, which uses, there's other things as well, which are really cool for this kind of thing. An interesting thing to remember is like not all duplication's bad, right? And you hear people kind of bandying around the term like dry, you know, yeah, we need to dry this up, we need to dry that up. And I think dry, in a sense, is misused and kind of an overloaded term as well. So what it really means, you know, the kind of canonical like explanation of dry is this whole single unambiguous authoritative representation, which makes sense to me. Now, churn as well is another metric that's going to give you a lot of insight into your code base. So especially when you notice that the churn is spread out widely across a code base. You know, generally what you try to do when you're packaging software, when you're building software, is try and keep the things that change frequently close together. So a broad level of churn shows you that you're kind of not really succeeding with that. there are packages that you can use that can basically introduce all other forms of metrics into your applications as well. It's kind of cool. And you're all probably thinking, like, what about Code Climate? So yeah, Code Climate's really cool as well, but it's a great service, and like most of us probably use it on our open source projects. Obviously, it's free for open source, and it's not particularly expensive for commercial applications. And we use it at the Money Advice service, and you know, people understand it. It gives you really nice graphs and stuff like that, and it takes a lot less effort than all of those individual things to bring together. So it's important that you don't capture too much and only capture everything that you actually plan to action, right? Because otherwise it's kind of a burden. So then you want to make it known, right? So a good thing is, when you've got your kind of CI environment and you've got a piece of kind of crufty code and you see that coverage level ticking up, you know, and you see the cyclomatic complexity dropping down, you know, those kind of things, it has a kind of a sort of a gamifying effect, right? And people, like, you know, people, not even software developers, like other non-technical people can understand graphs, and they can understand when something rises, it's probably good. When something lowers, it's probably good or bad. You know, so you can get this stuff into a dashboard, and you can get it really visible on some kind of information radiator in your team, right? And you can gamify it, as I've said. So anyway, step 3, so step 3 is tests. So, you know, so you wander in and you open your project and you look in your specs directory and you look at the models and you're like, ah, yes, they've written tests. And then like you go into one of them and you're like, ah, shit. Yeah, that happens, right? And it's all kinds of bad, of course. And there's different kinds of tests. You know, you can go into projects with absolutely no tests, and you can go into projects with no tests, slow tests, sorry. And you can go into projects with low quality tests, or you can get an unholy mixture of all three, of course. And a key thing for me that I try and explain to people that I work with is this idea about tests, and it's almost like people treat them as like sacred objects that once they're written, like forevermore shall they exist, right? And, you know, tests can be transient. You know, you can delete tests, you know, and tests can have specific meanings at specific times. So you might find that you write a feature spec that helps you drive out the thing that you're doing, and then you drop down into the kind of unit test cycle, and you kind of stub out all of your collaborations, and you're building your software, and you get done, and your feature test goes green. And then really, you know, you've got a whole suite full of tests that probably don't necessarily give you much beyond that whole like exploratory phase when you were building your software. And you can get rid of them, you know, you can delete tests. Contrary to popular belief, your hair won't set on fire, you won't suddenly fall down dead. You know, people have deleted tests before and survived to tell the tale. So zero coverage, you're going to think, oh my gosh, you know, there's absolutely no coverage on this piece of code. Like, how am I going to modify this code? Well, you know, you can introduce feature specs. And feature specs are really cool for characterizing a specific piece of code. One of the common misconceptions about feature specs is that they need to exist, or they need to drive the browser or a headless browser. A common thing that we do is write feature specs at a lower level that basically surround the concepts in a domain. They don't always need to drive the browser. They don't always need to be slow as well, which is a key thing. So, you know, poor or slow unit tests, were they created for a different phase of development? Were they created at a different time? You can delete them, right? Repeat after me, you know, tests are not sacred artifacts, so you can kill them with fire. So anyway, step 4. So the next step is you've got your test coverage going higher, you know, you've kind of strategized and figured out exactly the changes you're going to make. So the next thing to do is just literally seek and destroy. So this is a cool one, right? So you can go into your code base and you can really, really reduce the surface area. You can be absolutely merciless when you're deleting code. Remember, that obviously, that the metrics should drive any decisions that you're making. And you're going to find as well, of course, there's going to be low-hanging fruit, you know, goals which should be easily achievable and don't require the most effort. But remember to improve incrementally, right? So there was a really interesting quote. This really makes sense to me because I've done this a million times. So being one undo away from passing tests, it's really, really tricky to do. And the danger is, of course, when you don't stick to that, when you don't do that, you get to a position where you're like, oh gosh, yeah, all of these tests are failing, and you just table flip, right? You just git reset, and you just go home, or you just go to the pub if you're English. So versioning Rails, so this is an interesting thing. So like most of the projects that I've consulted on, the real old crufty projects, it's no coincidence that they've just not bothered trying to keep up with the latest versions of Rails. And it's one of these things, right? It's like the whole ethos behind integrate early and often kind of thing. You know, if you stay on top of these things, if you stay on top of the version bumps, it's going to help you in the long run. So anyway, step 5 of the patented 5-step program. Obviously, keeping it full unicorn at all times. You know, you can fail the build, so once you get to a position where you're comfortable with the metrics that you're capturing and the direction they're going in, you know, you can do things like make them actually fail the build on a check-in and stuff. That's always going to be cool. Always be improving. Perception, metrics, tests, reduce and improve, staying full unicorn. Now we're approaching the end of the talk. Hope you've enjoyed it. So some of you folks might have heard of Foursquare before. So I'm going to introduce an idea to you. So we've got Foursquare over here. We've got sharks over there. We've got Foursquare for sharks. Right? This is really cool. This is actually a real thing. And like, you know, you can see information about sharks, hot sharks in your area. So like, so I had an idea, you know, I had a bit of a startup idea. And the people that run this, I actually contacted them just this morning. And I told them, you know, like, so I shit you not, literally 5 seconds before the talk started, they replied to me. Well, you're going to regret that. So I replied back to them, and I haven't seen if they've responded to me yet. They've actually probably just called the police. They're arranging my deportation, like, as we speak. So I was like, well, you know, couple of sharks, kicking back. Just see what happens. Yeah, so that's me, and I'd like to thank you all for listening. You've been a great audience. Cheers. If anyone's got any questions, of course, you know, you're more than welcome to ask. Like, are you crazy?
You could extend the shark thing to bang with sharks.
To what sharks?
Bang with sharks.
Oh. I'm not looking for a
How's the Queen doing?
The Queen's okay, you know, we don't really hang out as much as we used to. Yeah, she's into kind of, yeah, she's gone more down the sort of single page web apps route, which I don't tend to agree with, you know. She does her shit, I do mine. Cool, thanks everyone.